Welcome to the Connected Campus podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Connected Campus podcast, episode number 14, a rebroadcast episode, pulling this one out from the archives, interview with Warren Kennard, a great leader in the edtech scene down in Australia. So he's worked in a bunch of different organizations and has built a really great learning community around his Connect Ed online courses. So really appreciate that we're able to reshare out this conversation from a couple of years ago, still really relevant things about how we're sort of emerging from this period of kind of disruption in the higher education space. So definitely connect with Warren to keep the conversation going. But without further ado, this is episode number 14, a rebroadcast episode with Warren Kennard.
I'm Dr. Jeff Borden. I'm a professor, an administrator, a consultant for more than 20 years. But today, it's my great pleasure to introduce Warren Kennard. He's the founder and CEO of Connect Ed and has done a lot in the education space all around the world. And we're really, really glad to have you. Thanks for coming here today, Warren.
No, it's only a pleasure. It's wonderful to be here, Jeff.
So I've known Warren for a little bit of time now, and I think I've said to him, he reminds me very much of a very good friend of mine who happens to be also from South Africa. If you're picking up on the accent, Warren is from South Africa, but he lives in Australia. Which is a place that is also near and dear to my heart. I've been there many times. Tell us, how did you kind of get from South Africa to Australia? How did that journey take place?
Yeah, well, it was a very interesting journey, and Jeff, it was really a case of wanting to explore and see more of the world and work in other parts of the world. And I'd had the privilege of working in the United Kingdom for a period of time, and traveled a fair amount through my studies, and just as being a young person, I was privileged to be able to travel around a fair amount. Never went to Australia, but upon the acquisition of a business that I was involved in called Get Smarter in Cape Town, which I'm sure we'll speak a little bit about the history there. It was just a coincidental time to make that move, and my wife and I and two small children decided to immigrate, and we've been in Australia for about 4 years now, and enjoying every moment of it.
Very nice. So you really have, I know you've been all over the globe. We share a couple of connections. I know we know some, pretty solid instructional designers and a couple of famous academics. As you travel the world like that, do you always just sort of look in to see what's going on educationally in every place you visit?
Yeah, well, I've had a very keen fascination in higher education for about 20 odd years now, and called the sector my home pretty much from the day I stepped in it. And that was shortly after my studies. I kind of fell into higher education, and mainly in private higher education. And I knew I had an aptitude for sales, marketing, commerce, business development, and partnerships, and these types of arenas were seemed to come quite innate for me. And higher education as a business felt really good in the early stages of my career. Still does, of course, but it felt like I was really able to give meaningful value back to society, and it felt like a product that I could really hang my hat on and be proud of each day with the work that I was doing. So it kind of, I fell into it that way, and ever since have been keenly fascinated to understand the ecosystem a lot better. I probably err more on the business side of it. So I see the business of education and how that's going to evolve and to make that sustainable and more accessible for more people. And so my interest has always been what's happening at the periphery, what's novel hitting the sector. I kind of never had the opportunity to work inside the public ecosystem as much as I would like, and probably avoided it because I was fearful of the bureaucracy and maybe getting lost in the woodwork there a little bit. So I kind of veered more towards the private sector, which was a bit more malleable at the time and more innovative, and now have found myself coming full circle and trying to support institutions of all sizes, shapes, and colors to kind of advance and look toward a different future. So sorry, I waffled on there a bit, but that gives you a bit of a taste of my interest.
No, it's obvious if you just go and look at your LinkedIn profile. You can just see such an affinity for higher education throughout your, it's just peppered throughout everything you've done. It's exciting, I think. The marriage between private and institutional, I think, is important. We are going to struggle to do things at scale if we try to do everything independently, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This whole movement towards collaboration, which I know you speak a lot about yourself, and this need for us to co-create a future and to work collaboratively with one another is certainly the way forward. It seems like standing alone is a much more difficult task these days, especially with the shortage of skills in particular, and the access to various markets is becoming a dire need to work together to find more effective solutions. So yes, I would strongly concur with that statement.
So I want to start. That was our intro. Now we're going to actually jump in, but I always start with the same question. This podcast is called The Connected Campus. Without predisposing you too much, what does connected mean to you within the context of higher education and some of the work that you've done alongside of higher education? How does a connected student versus a disconnected student look, or a connected staff versus disconnected faculty? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I did contemplate or just reflect on this a little bit. And there's so many areas that one can run down when you think about connected. You could look at the student to faculty. You could look at the institutions to one another. You could look about the public partnerships. So there's a lot of areas where that connected space relates. And I think that it's symptomatic of why I call the business that I look after is Connect Ed, and for that very reason, because I see the interconnectedness of all of these attributes of higher education, these various ways of working, the various things that we can do to support students and so on, and how we can create a more connected environment for all. But probably just leaning into one or two of them, if you look at the Connect Ed student, what we're very keen on doing is making sure that there's a strong correlation between the students themselves and also between students and faculty. And I think that the voice, that conversational piece that is often lost between a student and a professor standing at the front of an auditorium, there's often not that dialogue between the professor and the individual student, and notwithstanding also the group itself. And so the enablement for discussion amongst peers as you debate and grapple with the various topics at hand. I found that was lacking for me, and certainly in my MBA that it became more to the fore, that need for collaboration and to work through materials and so on. So there's that piece which I think is critical, and then connected from an organizational standpoint. I think it's so important for us to have conversations together like this conversation, other conversations where one can bring different disparate viewpoints together and really debate them and have a level of discourse that's going to help us shift some cognitive spaces in our head so that we understand and can work through this material and the thinking processes in much more detail.
I knew you would have a lovely answer, seeing as the name of your group is Connect Ed. I really thought that was going to be fantastic, and thank you. I had the opportunity to interview Michael Stollard. I don't know if you're familiar with his book, The Connection Culture. He just does a lovely job of talking about how connections they're linkages, they're bonds. We can actually measure them. And I think one of the reasons I like the word connection versus, a lot of people use engagement and things like that. Connection is measurable. Engagement's a little harder, I think, to measure. It's a little more ambiguous. So as you created Connect Ed, can you tell us a little bit about, what was the purpose? What were you trying to do? What was your vision? And I also believe you and I share a bit of an affinity for trying to reform the space, but trying to transform, maybe is a better word, the space. How does Connect Ed help you do that?
Yeah, firstly, I love your engagement versus connection kind of example there. I think it's very apt and very relevant and necessary distinction between those. So Connect Ed, yeah, it's an interesting proposition, and really how it started was emigrating over to Australia found me not being liquid with a lot of cash, and my standard of living dropped a hell of a lot, simply because we lost a lot of money as a result of the immigration. And so I realized that if I wanted to build products and services and kind of support the ecosystem that I loved, I would have to find an innovative model to kind of create that. And so the crowdsourcing movement, if you look at the Ubers of the world and the Airbnbs and the like, they were very clever in using existing assets incredibly well and finding an innovative business model behind it. So I'm probably jumping ahead a bit, so I'll just give you the backstory. I've been studying since I left school in various different disciplines, and done short programs, done formal qualifications and the like, and I really wanted to do something in higher education. I scouted and trawled through the web and had a look at what options are available. And back in 3-4 years ago, I couldn't find anything that I was particularly excited about. There was plenty of formal qualifications out there. Don't get me wrong. You've got wonderful programs at UPenn and ASU and various others, even more so now. But they expensive. They are long. And so I was looking for something short, very targeted in the stuff that I really enjoyed. And I wanted to see, how do I benchmark myself, my own abilities in this space? And that's why I wanted to do a program like that, to meet like-minded professionals, but also to see how much do I know? Where are my gaps? What are the things that I need to know more about? And who can I learn from? And I was disappointed with what I found. So there wasn't any great program that I was particularly fascinated about. So having built many short personalized online courses, which we refer to them as the SPOC movement, where you've got these collaborative cohort-led style learning. I had built many of these programs. I had access to a wonderful platform in Kahoot, and I decided to build it. And that brings me full circle to the conversation around the crowdsourcing element of it. I knew there were two problems with higher education that were often criticized of higher education. And the one was the relevancy and the currency of the content. So oftentimes we had programs going out to market that were bachelors in IT that failed to address cloud technologies, for example. And probably I would guesstimate there's programs on the shelf right now at a university somewhere where that is still the case. And so the criticism around the time that it took to bring those courses to market, and then also the cost. I wanted to kind of nullify the concern that programs cost a lot of money to build and to bring those to market. And so the hypothesis there was those two, and I wanted to address those through the program. Plus, I wanted to have some fun and meet some interesting people and engage a community that was interested in the same sorts of things as I was. And so the program was born about 18 months ago off the back end of a couple of napkin conversations with various people, as these things often do. And I built out this schema for an 8-week program that takes you kind of on a zero to hero journey across the continuum of higher education. And the whole experience is peppered with the insights of thought leaders, people like yourself and others that are doing fascinating work in the space. And then we curate that conversation and guide the student through this journey and hopefully they come out on the other side with a lot more ammunition around the strategy of how they can rebuild their institution. And this is what you speak to about the reform piece. We wanted to make sure that the student comes out with some tangible outcomes, having a strategic framework upon which to look at each facet of their business and how they can transform various aspects of it. And we can go into detail on the nature of the program, but that's essentially at a high level abstraction what we're trying to achieve.
I knew some of that. That's fantastic. I love hearing the work that you're putting in. In fact, I now have two questions that I'd like to ask you. The first one really is just sort of an elephant in the room kind of question. You know, we're sitting here today, March 24th or 25th for you. COVID has obviously disconnected a lot of what has gone on in every sector. I mean, higher ed's not special in that regard. I'm curious, and I think our audience will be particularly curious. We certainly hear about issues in the United States with regard to the pandemic, but I don't know that too many people are very aware of what's going on in other countries. How has COVID impacted you guys down in Australia? How have you weathered that? Not weathered that? How's it been going?
I'll take it from two perspectives. One on a personal level, and then kind of more from an education perspective. But from a personal perspective, the approach in Australia has been very much around a zero tolerance approach to it. It's a case of saying, like, when we have a case, an individual case, we will shut the borders and make sure that we don't let this thing spread. But the idea here is that we wanted to make sure that we don't get a great deal of cases and a great deal of deaths, and so we've taken a zero tolerance approach, and that's really worked. I mean, we have a great deal of freedom here in Australia. We can travel quite freely within the borders, and we can have fun with our friends and family, and obviously take the necessary precautions when need be. But it's taken toll on the society, certainly. There's a lot of people that have been without work, while the government has provided a lot of support and opportunities for people to grow and develop. There's still many affected, and we already had quite a significant issue of mental health, and that's only perpetuated now and become quite a problem for us as a society, and I can understand why. It's been a tough time for everyone. From an education standpoint, it's absolutely created a great deal of havoc. I'm not going to be very good with specific stats, but I would definitely think that it would be in the order of about 25 to 30% enrollment decline as a result of foreign students. Many universities are in the order of close to a quarter of their business comes in from international students, and with the borders being closed to international students, that's been a huge issue. And so we cannot underestimate how big a deal that is, especially when it's sitting as number two. Higher education is sitting as number two on the GDP as far as the Australian market is concerned, to the best of my knowledge. So it's a big issue, and notwithstanding the issue of many thousands of individuals who have been made redundant or taken voluntary redundancies as a result of COVID. So we've had in the order of about 8,000 or so over the course of the last year from local universities. So it's been a big issue.
I'm curious with I don't want to say the extra time, because I realize that a lot of professors, staff, administrators suddenly were having to do, as you said, someone left, and so they ended up with a job and a half or something like that. But potentially there's also a little bit more time to spend on professional development. And with your organization, I would potentially see your organization as not an overly threatening group of people. It's not like professors teaching professors that they're worried that they're going to be, called out in some way or seen. Has it had an uptick there, therefore, for you guys in terms of professional development, or less?
It's been very interesting. First of all, we're not throwing enormous dollars at advertising the program, so I wouldn't be able to know whether there's been an uptick or a downside to it, especially as a result of it being quite a nascent product. But what I have noticed certainly is that the local market is very depressed from a professional development space within the higher education institutions. Budgets are not freely available as they were before, and people's workloads, to your point, have tripled. And there's a state of inertia with a lot of individuals looking over their shoulders whether they're going to be retaining their work for a period of time. There's a lot of jostling for positions. It's a very, very tough time. So I think that while the product that we've produced and the course is intended to help support these individuals to carve out new paths and new opportunities, because we believe there's plenty of them in this change, we're not seeing a significant uptick from the local market. The interest has been principally out of the US, UK, and in other parts of the world. So the local market seems to be in a bit of a interesting space, which I haven't quite been able to put my finger on as yet. But workload definitely has increased, and I think that the machines are really battling to adjust to this new pace and this new way of working.
let me leapfrog off of that into a sort of secondary question. Then, I'm right now working on a book. It's an anthology with 15 other authors, and we're all talking about the problems with basically the throughput elements of higher ed. So, input, everyone's got their politicians, pundits, everybody's talking about access and what that looks like. Output, jobs and whether people go into careers, all this stuff. That's a great, worthwhile conversation. But this book focuses on throughput, teaching and learning mostly. And one of the authors, ironically out of China, which I think is a major player in the Australian higher ed market, he suggests that when it comes to professional development, different countries seem to set up their faculty to allow them or dissuade them from actually studying, teaching, and learning. And in the United States, particularly, we have a tendency to say to faculty, you can study whatever you want, you can research whatever you want, your professional development is your own. And as a result of that, it seems that most faculty spend most of their time working on discipline. They research their discipline, they look at math or science or history, and not really spending a lot of time in teaching and learning. I'm curious, with your experiences, both from Australia, internationally, with ConnectEd, do you find that to be an issue? And if so, how do you think we might start to address that?
It's a great question, and it's probably one of the more complex ones, and probably, to be fair, also something that I'd be really on the border of my level of expertise. But what I can say is that I notice distinctly different behaviors in the private and public sector. That I have noticed. And it seems to me that from a traditional higher education point of view, universities and colleges and the like, there tends to be, and I'm probably going to get slammed for this, so I'll take it on the chin, but there seems to be a little bit of apathy around learning in this particular space. So what is happening around us, and it tends to be quite insular focused around, we're doing something really special, we've got a hell of a lot of students always interested in our programs, and I can deep dive into my area of expertise and really give them something meaningful, and that may or may not translate, as you said, into a wonderful job or a career opportunity down the track. But their professional development, be it from administrators right the way through to faculty and other support staff, tends to be pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty rudimentary. That's programs that are just made available within the university itself. Whereas on the spectrum of the non-traditional provider, as let's just lump it into that, being anything playing on the periphery in private higher education, be it boot camp providers, short courses, OPMs, you name it, they have a sensational appetite to learn and to really get to the nub of many of the issues so that they can improve. And that's mainly, we could loosely say it's a result of the financial benefit in doing that. So I will be a stronger organization if I'm better equipped. And that probably hasn't been a specific need of a university or a traditional higher education provider to date, but that is changing at a rate of knots. And those that are leaning into that are having great success, as we can see with the ASUs, the Western Governors, Southern New Hampshire's, just from that side of the planet. But if we look on this side of the planet, there's equally good examples of organizations. I mean, one that I worked at before was RMIT Online, and RMIT University is a significant university by size. I mean, you've got like 90,000 students. It's a big ecosystem, and there's some very novel work that many of the institutions here locally are trying to do to get a different cut through into the market. And so I think once there's a commercial imperative, the kind of need increases for some form of professional development. I know I answered that question very poorly, but for me, the difference is really in the kind of incentive that's been placed on these various different personalities in these organizations.
No, Warren, I think that was completely fair. And in fact, the private versus public conversation may pop up here again with the ensuing question I'd like to ask you. So one of the professional development areas that I like to work with faculty on is the brain. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of brain science that seems to make its way into classroom teaching, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I think it's quite unfortunate. We know more about the brain than we've ever known before, and obviously that is the element that you need in a human's body in order to learn, right? But we also know that while academics and cognitive things are impacted by the brain, so are non-cognitive things. We know that more students drop out, fail out, transfer out because of non-academic issues. They're lonely, they don't feel networked, they don't feel supported, they don't know how to accomplish something, they don't have the mindset to move through. I'm curious, do you work in any realm with those things, with the folks that come through your program? And if so, how do we sort of balance the realities of the human experience with the needs of the quote unquote academic experience of the brain?
It's a great question and something we absolutely need to do more of. And I think to your point, the science that's coming out, I listen, read a lot, and I know enough to get me into trouble on these topics very quickly because I can get tongue-tied very quickly on it. But I know enough to know how important this is going to be, and we're seeing it more and more down the track of personalized learning, very narrow streams of understanding of if we need to apply ourselves to one particular task, how we can do that infinitely better than what we could before because we understand a lot of what's happening in the brain and how we learn. And I think there's a interesting juxtaposition here on the very personalized track of learning and our ability to understand cognitively how we learn. And then this other end of the spectrum, which is very much looking at community and this element that you raised now, Jeff, around loneliness, about being working, and I'm really, really busy. And so that community and that understanding of that individual and the empathy that surrounds that, and then this very single track kind of understanding of how we learn. I see there's an interesting interplay there that we've got to navigate through, because one of the challenges that I found is that I am concerned somehow about these very good AI and machine learning algorithms that are very much taking you down a single track of focus. And while that's brilliant to be able to learn how to code exceptionally quickly, and it's giving me a very personalized experience, it is creating a tunnel vision that's void of everything else that's happening around me through the community that I should be engaging, the kind of people, the EQ skills and so on that we speak about all the time. It's that interplay between those human skills and these very, very tightly bound tracks of learning that I haven't got my head around, and I'm still trying to figure out. In the course, we definitely bring up the issue of cognitive science, how we're starting to think about how we learn and how we can build that into our programs. And is in particular around online, I think there's a huge move towards that, because that rote style of learning that's been happening in the college experience face to face is going to be much more difficult to change. Online, we can do that a lot more effectively, and I think there's already a lot of work starting to move into that space. But I forget even your question, and I hope I can come back to answering it.
No, you did. You said you touched on impacting the cognitive. That's great. But you led into something that I think is also a really important question that I'd like to ask you. Now, this you actually have some experience doing. So let me couch the element of online as you just were talking about like this. I've been in this game for a long time. I'm not a techie. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't scare me. So I often get put in those roles where I'm in charge of technology for education, but that's okay. I think it's fair to say that most visionaries, at least back in the early 2000s, really pictured a much different landscape of education technology and our usage of it, its efficacy, how it would sort of change and transform higher ed. And I don't think it's unfair to say that it hasn't happened. Most people would not say, wow, this is the utopia that I imagined. We're not even close. So I'm curious, you use technology to deliver most of your stuff, right? If that's the case, what are your thoughts around how we use this amazing platform to deliver differentiation and varied assets and interesting stuff with AI, as you've already alluded to, and virtual reality, altered reality, all of these things. How do we get there? What's stopping us from getting there, and how have you used it with ConnectEd?
Yeah, really good questions, and a very difficult question at that. It's unfortunately incremental for me. The way I look at it, it's got to be incremental benefit that's going to slowly tip over and create very unique products that are going to service this industry very, very well. At the moment, it's diabolically bad. You can and it's perpetuated by the system, because many of the institutions that we work with use a system like a Canvas or a Blackboard or a Moodle or any number of different LMS technologies that are available. And when these novel edtechs come along and they've got one wonderful thing for a quiz tool, or they've got wonderful engagement tools and so on, it becomes so difficult to integrate these and bring them to life within the universities and even in the private institutions, because there are protocols that need to be followed. There's various things that need to get signed off along the way. There's various efficacies that need to take place. There's other competing tools. There's political interests. There's all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and it makes it extremely complex. And so I'm not a technology expert myself either, and I use them in the space of my work, and I see a lot of the technologies. And so I've had the privilege of viewing them, understanding how they work, and how they could add tremendous value. But at the same time, yeah, I can't speak from a very technology infrastructure point of view. What I use in ConnectEd program is a system called Kahoot. It's a proprietary pseudo, call it an LMS slash learning experience platform of some kind, because it's a hybrid interface. But what it does allow, there's a couple of lessons that I've learned. One is to use one system is helpful, because the minute you jump into multiple different systems, if you've got Slack and you've got some kind of LMS and you've got Zoom for conversations, and you've got some other platform that students have to log into, it becomes incredibly dysfunctional and incredibly complex. And students then switch off. And what's worse is that you haven't got the analytics underneath it that's captured neatly in some kind of data lake that you can then mine and interrogate that information, or it becomes much more complex to do that. So my advice has always been, find a system that does the 80% and either drop the 20%, or think about how you can integrate it differently. But the more that one system can do, the better your chances of gathering all the insights that are needed. And Kahoot just happens to be one of those platforms that has engagement tools, be it like discussion forums and polls and all kinds of weird and wonderful kind of additional tools. But it's also an accessible platform. So it's got the WCAG 2.1 AA accessible guidelines that have been met. It's got the live Zoom kind of sessions and interface there, and it's very easy to use, and it's simply designed. So there are great platforms out there. There's wonderful platforms out there. Are they the holy grail of what is best learning? We're yet to figure that out. And actually, I would argue that online education is incredibly nascent in what it's achieved to date. They are going to be massive new developments as we understand the brain better, as we understand how we engage with one another better in online modes. And I'm just looking for the glue that brings all of those various systems together to create the ecosystem. And yeah, there may never be that. When we need to, that may not be where we end up.
Absolutely love the use one system if you can, or at least find a way to make interoperability so that you've got data. I can't tell you how often in my career I have seen people cobble together systems that don't talk to each other, don't talk to a data warehouse of any sort. And you're right, they end up just shooting blind. They have no idea where to make changes.
I've worked with several universities in various parts of the world where I've had a look at some of this infrastructure, and to get knowledge of whether a student is actually even logged into the platform is difficult. So we are at that end of the spectrum, and then we've got wonderful organizations that are doing some amazing work, that know so much about their students and the way in which we learn. It's frightening. The Area Lyceum crowd, Sana Labs, there's a whole slew of wonderful organizations that are doing interesting work. And so we're on these two ends of the spectrum, and it's scary. But again, it's a massive opportunity, but it's scary at the same time.
No, I agree, and I wonder, is that going to come home to roost, or are those ones on the other end of the spectrum that are struggling going to lose out at the end of the day? And I guess time will tell. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum, though. I like that. I like the two ends of this continuum. Let's look at those really great players. Let's stream a little bit. I like to sort of end my conversations with our guests by asking them if you had the proverbial magic wand, or if you were in king for a day, however you want to look at it. What are the effective practices that you would love to see be brought to bear for this sector, for higher education, without worrying about politics or inappropriate sacrifices for success and other things like that? What would you do? What would it look like to you if we had a goal of, say, 3 to 5 years from now? We need something to shoot for. What do you think we should shoot for?
I haven't figured it out. I wouldn't even be able to tell you what a perfect scenario could look like. What I do know, let's maybe take it one step back. I'm worried on both ends of the spectrum. I'm worried about the institutions that are, in inverted commas, nowhere, and have a long way to go to evolve and to service the needs of their students and their local market. And on the other end of the spectrum, I must say that I'm worried about some things around what's happening with Neuralink and others. Because if we look at in our course, we address the kind of Peter Thiel, the 0 to 1 kind of view of what could happen in the sector. And if we look at what happened with Airbnb and Uber and others to the transportation industry, we've got the same situation here that could be apparent in higher education, where the next competitor that we have in the market may be the computer chip. And is it a case of transferring knowledge to somebody? Because then the opportunity for a Neuralink, or to get plugged into the matrix and having on-demand information at any given point in time, is our primary competitor. If it's to create an ecosystem that is going to allow for a more holistic and wonderful society that everyone wants to be part of, then our institutions have to start looking at how do they develop our human capability and our human competency and so on. So I am, like many, in a state of incredible flux at the moment as to what the future could look like. One thing I do want more conversation. And I feel that while I love the likes of the ASU GSV conferences, while I love the podcasts that are available, including yours and the one that I have and many others, I feel that they lack the conversation that needs to take place, and they shouldn't be sitting around a board table. They should be around every single individual that's got an interest in the space. And that's really what ConnectEd was trying to do, was trying to listen to a podcast like this, extract insights, have a conversation around how can I apply this in my organization and start shifting the needle now. And so it's that conversation, it's that community that I want to really see come together. The private-public partnerships, the likes of the Instrides, the guilds, these organizations that are doing phenomenal work to try and bridge the two. Between industry and academia, and more collaboration is probably where we're going to end up in the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm very optimistic that is taking place. There are a lot of initiatives that are taking place, especially in the US, been very proactive about it, and that's what excites me, and that's what I see the future being. But I do worry about these two ends of the spectrum, and unfortunately, yes, I think some of these universities that are already struggling will become obsolete and will perish. And I am worried on the other end of the spectrum that we haven't got enough integrity in our institutions, and also enough philosophical thought around what is the ramifications of some of these technologies. So these are the kinds of things that I'm stewing with at the moment. And these are the kinds of topics we discuss in the program.
You may be the first person to actually say the Matrix, but I think we all kind of bop around it all the time as we're talking.
If you have a look at some of the work that's happening with the VR technology at the moment and augmented reality, and while everybody looks at these and goes, yes, they're very peripheral, they haven't got mainstream attention, you're not walking around with a HoloLens all the time on your face, and nor is Neuralink, if it's semi-effective in rats, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get it into human testing. But any of these has the potential to be cataclysmic for the sector in its kind of in order of magnitude difference if some of these things come to fruition. And I think we need to start having the conversation about some of those, especially when we look at AI, ML, your VR, your AR, and then the work of Neuralink and your cognitive science. It comes into that throughout, through all of those.
Well, connecting all of that stuff, I know we've got some good people working on it. Like yourself, I hope that I'm in that mix too. But we're trying. And as we say goodbye here, I would love for our audience. We'll put it in the, if you're seeing this on a screen, make sure you look at the links. But can you just tell us the links that are relevant to you? Tell us how people can go find ConnectEd, how they can listen to the podcast, things like that.
Yeah, thank you. So it's www.getconnected.co is our website, and yes, as you said, we'll make all of that available. I'm simply seeking to have conversations about the things I don't understand, of which we can hear there's many of those, and I want to be an enabler of those conversations, and I want the course to be the place where those kinds of discussions happen, and so we can positively reform the institutions that where they need reform, and to encourage those to do wonderful and exciting work where that's an option for them to do.
Well, if nothing else, Warren, it's just it's still amazing to me, and I'm over 50 now. It's amazing to me to be able to talk to you. It's evening here in Colorado. It's morning there in Melbourne for you. Our ability to connect is greater than ever. I hope that we can really, to your point, use that power with the responsibility that it requires. But thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights, for talking to us about what's going on for some a world away, but for all of us really in the same backyard. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's only a pleasure. It's been a wonderful conversation, Jeff. I hope that was of value to the audience, and look forward to future engagements with you as well.
Thanks for listening to the Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Connected Campus.